Thank you for joining us on our webinar. In today's guest, we have Luke Payton, who is head teacher at St Augustine's Secondary School.
Yes, the high school, yeah.
Yeah, but you're also in charge of the sixth form as well.
Yeah.
So two phases. So we've just got a couple of questions for you, and just want to talk about, I think talking about culture is the main theme of the day. So the first question I've got is, so Luke, for those who haven't met you before, could you start by telling us a bit about your background in education and what led you to the position that you're in now?
Yeah, of course. So I started teaching just over 20 years ago. I'm an MFL secondary teacher by sort of trade, and sort of as soon as I qualified, was really interested in kind of behaviour management, pastoral work. So I worked my way up at a large secondary school, 11 to 18 in Worcestershire, and got to the point of being, my title there was a senior director of learning, which in normal language is more like an assistant head. And then after being there for a while, I transferred over to a middle school. So we're in a part of Worcestershire that has the 3-tier system.
Yeah.
So I transferred to a middle school that is 9 to 13 and became the deputy head there, once again in charge of behaviour safeguarding. So, you know, I've been able to have that broad breadth of experience for Key Stage 2 right up to Key Stage 5. And then after being there for a while, I had the opportunity to go and be a head teacher at a secondary school in Warwickshire that was in requires improvement. So that was a very challenging circumstance, but we managed to get the school out of requires improvement and get a good Ofsted. And then 2 years ago, I came to St Augustine's. So St Augustine's is in the 3-tier system. So we're a 13 to 18 high school. So we have students in year 9 to year 13. We have a large sixth form of over 300 students. And we were Ofsteded in April of 2024, where we maintained our outstanding. That was the 3rd year in a row. And last year, as a Catholic school, we're subject to Catholic Schools Inspectorate, and they inspected us last year, and we were also found to be outstanding there. However, that can be a little bit of a trap, because I think some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today that's been a big journey for us, and there's been lots of things that we've had to do, and just because we've got those kind of accolades of being outstanding doesn't mean that everything's perfect every day of the week. So hopefully we'll be able to share kind of the experience that we've had here, and just share what's worked well for us. You know, not here to teach grannies how to suck eggs, but it's just to hear from our experience.
I mean, that's a great career, by the way. What I wanted to know is, what's the biggest sacrifice you've had to make personally to make sure you do that job well? I don't think people talk about that enough.
No, I think, you know, that's interesting, because I think when you become, you know, a senior leader, and especially as a head teacher, it can be all-consuming, and you can feel like you are on duty 24 hours a day. So I think what's really important is to make sure that you are strict with yourself on that time where you kind of step away from it, and use a support network around you. So I'm really lucky that we've managed to build a fantastic senior leadership team that have responsibility for their areas, but we're all really supportive of one another, and nobody is blinkered and just only focuses on their area. They see their job as being a senior leader for the whole school. So if there are times where, you know, you need to step away and do something else, or, you know, you're not able to be there, you know, because as a head teacher, you know, there's so many expectations on your time, the team step in. And so it's very much a collegiate, collaborative approach. And it isn't just me as the head teacher that is, you know, the figurehead for the school. We operate as a team.
Yeah, that's a great approach, because I think leadership in any role can be quite an isolated, lonely place.
Definitely.
Which leads me on to my second question. So when you first joined St Augustine's, what kind of culture did you walk into? What stood out to you, and what did you immediately feel you need to shift or improve?
Yeah.
3 questions in one there.
No, it's fine. I think I've always been really frank and honest about, you know, the culture that we walked into at the school, and I'm honest with parents, you know, and I'm honest with staff and with visitors to our school. the school was in quite a challenging circumstance when I joined. There'd been a lot of instability in leadership. There had been a lot of staff turnover that had impacted on the students and their attitudes towards school, their attitudes to learning. With the parents, the parents' understanding of the school, the relationships had broken down. And so, when I got the position, I came around the school, and the school had been, seen as outstanding and had these accolades and this status. And I walked around the school and I was really honest with our CEO at the time and said, this school feels like a requires improvement school, and we've got a lot of work that we need to do here to get the culture where we need it to be. So that was really challenging. And I think, with the students didn't know me from Adam, so I was coming in and I was like, right, this is the way we're going to do things. So I needed to make sure that I got their trust and they believed in me and believed in what I wanted quite quickly to make sure we could make a rapid improvement.
With that, were there any non-negotiables that you introduced to students and staff?
Yeah, definitely. So I spent my first month here. I didn't step foot in my office once during that first month. I spent the first month just spending we start at 9:15, so we have quite a late start and finish at 3:45. From 9:15 to 3:45, I just walked to the school. So I interacted with students, I went into every lesson, interacted with staff where I could see the teaching and learning had become, very pedestrian, very, just going through the motions. I could see where relationships weren't strong. And it was about modeling that behaviour and saying, you can still have really high standards and high expectations, but still have real positive relationships. And for me, relationships are really key. So, for the students, they saw me as a really visible head teacher who was coming in to help. And, I wanted the best for them. I wanted the best for school. The staff saw me as a visible leader, that I was willing to get my hands dirty and, get stuck in. So automatically we start to build that positive relationship and that trust started to develop. So that was kind of the first thing that we did. And it was a tiring month. But near enough bang on the end of that month is when we got the Ofsted call. So they were coming in. So it was a bit of a panic, I will say, when we had the call, thinking, we're not ready. We've made great strides in that month of kind of being everything on lockdown, but I wanted things to be embedded. But yeah, then we had the visit, and there were challenges during the 2 days, but ultimately we got a judgment that we were really pleased with.
Okay, I mean, yeah, that sounds really positive, and especially to get it after a month of being there. That's a tough break for anyone, I think.
Yeah.
So we hear the phrase positive school culture a lot used in the schools, certainly that I speak to. What does it look like in your eyes? What do you what does good school culture look like to you?
I think the key thing that I've already mentioned is about those relationships, and that's relationships with staff, relationships with students, and relationships with the families that you serve. I was very open and frank when I came to this school that I felt there was a level of arrogance within the school where kind of we know better, and that had really been detrimental to the relationship with students and with families. And in order for the school to be successful and have a positive culture, you need to be able to work together and work collaboratively. So that's the key thing, is relationships, but then also that level of over communication. I think over communication is key. You need to constantly be revisiting your values and keep it really, really simple. So the key thing for me when I came here was it had been evolved that there were quite a few students that were sort of opting out of their learning and not being in lessons. So for me, the first thing I wanted to tackle was emptying the corridors and making sure that everybody was in lessons. And that's what we focused on. And until we'd got that right, we didn't decide to move on to anything else. So, when you walk into somewhere and you can see you've got loads of areas and you're kind of firefighting, you're thinking, I need to try and solve everything at once. But I think it's really important to take that step back and think, right, I'm going to focus on one thing. I'm going to do that really, really well, get that embedded, and then I'm going to move on to the next thing. And from my point of view, in my opinion, I don't think there's any harm in doing that. I think, when we're looking at school improvement, every school could have a list of things that they need to work on. But if you've got too many, you're all going to just do them, to a superficial level. So to really embed that, let's have a sole focus on one thing. Let's get everybody understanding the rationale and the vision behind it and what you want to do, what good looks like. So what do you want to see at the end? And then just keep on nailing that until you get it right, and then think, right, we've got that. We're going to move on to the next thing. But that isn't to forget that thing that you've already done. There is still opportunity, just like teaching a lesson when you need to do the retrieval practice. You need to do the same when it comes to culture, and you're looking at your routines and structures to make sure that they're really embedded.
Like getting back to basics, starting with the basics first, doing that really well.
I think sometimes in education, we forget the basics, and we want to do these things that are really, forward thinking, really innovative. But you can't do those until you've got the solid foundation. So sometimes it is about taking stock and thinking, right. So one thing we do is every half term we operate something called 100% compliance in school, and we communicate it with parents and with students at the end of a half term, saying when you come back it's 100% compliance. We have full school lineup. We do it every day anyway, but we have a full school lineup. They have a full uniform check. Any students that are not adhering to our uniform policy are placed in internal exclusion with either myself or my deputy head, to make sure that they've got our standards. We find that, we do that every half term, and this half term when we came back from Christmas, on the first day, I think we only had about 6 students that weren't complying with our uniform. The same with behaviour. If we have any behaviour instance when we're operating 100% compliance, students are automatically removed from that lesson and are placed into internal exclusion for the rest of the day. So what you see within that 100% compliance timeframe, the number of students drastically decreases because they don't like it, and they think, right, I need to be part of this community. I want to be part of this community. Yeah, so I need to listen to what the standards are, and then when everybody does it well, we all are successful, and we all achieve. So that's been a real important structure for us within our school, and a real positive process. And our parents and our community have been really supportive of it. They know it's going to happen. We communicate it really, really clearly, so there's no surprises. We don't get anybody upset because the child's come to school in their trainers, and parents know you need to have your school shoes. So that's been really powerful for us in making sure that we've got that positive culture.
In your experience of sort of teaching leadership, do you think there's a culture myth that schools think about themselves? Do you think all schools have got a good grip on what culture actually is? Or do you think that they think it's something different than what it actually is?
I think everybody has got a grip in their own way, but I think there are some things that people don't think about as being part of the school culture. So there are some key things that are just really little nuanced things that, for me, are really, really important. So, for example, one thing I set up as soon as I got here was a communication policy, and that outlines to everybody, what the expectations are around communication, because I found that I was getting, upset parents and carers that were saying, right, I've phoned in, I've emailed in, I've not had a response. So I set up this policy and shared it with everybody and said, right, this is what you do when somebody, contacts us via email or phone call. They need to have a contact within 24 hours to acknowledge that they've made contact, because there's nothing worse than phoning somewhere and nobody getting back to you. They might not be able to get the answer within 24 hours, but they need to have that acknowledgement. And then they have a further 48 hours in which to try and resolve their issue. And what I've seen by putting that policy in place and making it really crystal clear to everybody, it gets sent out regularly to parents, staff get reminded of it regularly, those unhappy situations have decreased massively. to things like one thing for me is when I speak to parents, I never refer to myself as Mr. Payton. I call myself Luke, and that's just there to build that warmth and build that positive relationship, and for them to also realise I'm a human being. I'm a normal person. This is my job. I've got a daughter who is the same age as some of the students in my school. I have the same challenges as them. I'm not sitting in my ivory tower kind of thinking any differently to how they are. And I've got to call myself Luke. Parents still call me Mr. Payton. That's absolutely fine. But I just find that it really helps, take away that barrier and sort of break the ice with parents. And that's something really insignificant, but that's really helped to shift the culture, I think, with some of our parents in particular.
Keeping it simple and
Really
consistency
simple.
really helps.
Yeah. So things like, I know that our parents that we serve, this community we serve, there is no point me sending out a 15-page newsletter every Friday because they will not read it. The way that our parents will interact with our school is through social media. So, you'll see that our social media pages, I put everything on social media because I'm a firm believer, and I say this to staff, there's for if there is one negative thing about school, we're going to need like 20 positive things to outweigh it. So I speak to staff regularly where I want to share everything that's going on in school to sort of open the door to our school and for parents to feel part of it and see what's going on. And that really wasn't evident before. That was, the presence of the school. It was very insular.
Do you think that over communication really helps build, is part of the school culture then?
Definitely. So, one example that I can think of is, just recently in the first week back after Christmas, where, we're in Redditch and the snow had been quite bad. And, we'd had all of that, saying that the weather warning was coming. And so from the day, as soon as I think it was the Monday, they announced the weather warning, I started talking to parents saying, look, there's a weather warning coming on Thursday. I might have to close the school. You need to understand that I might have to close the school and there might not be much snow here in Redditch because I've got to think about all of my staff that travel. When parents think about their schooling, they might think, well, when I was at school, all my teachers lived in the town where the school was. That isn't the case anymore. We have some staff that travel over an hour to get into school, and we're such close proximity to Birmingham. The snow is always really bad when it snows in the city centre. So I had to make that really clear that don't get kind of angry with school if the snow isn't as bad in Redditch, but I have to make the decision to close because there's so many more things that I need to think about as opposed to the students just trying to get in. And I'm pleased to say, we didn't get any complaints through that and actually had supportive parents because I was really honest and said, look, whatever decision I make is not going to be popular with somebody. Some parents will say close, some parents will say stay open. I can't win in this situation, but you need to understand where I'm coming from. And we actually had emails and contact from parents saying we really appreciate your communication. I think that's just one example of showing how that over communication is really, really key.
Yeah, we do that in this business, especially when you're trying to manage change and stuff.
Yeah,
you need to communicate really early on, follow it through, and even after. I think,
definitely.
sort of talking about sort of the results and whatnot. But yeah, I think that's a really positive thing. So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about is obviously the pandemic was like 5 years ago. Well, 6 years ago now. Jeez. My hairline's gone back a bit further. But what we're seeing is that certainly pupil behaviour has could I say got worse, or there's certainly a challenge with pupil behaviour. As a school leader, have you seen that, and what do you suggest for schools to begin with to try and change that sort of culturally? And because I guess it's something where you need to work, like you said before, it's a community approach, isn't it? I guess you need to work with the teachers, the parents, and the pupils.
Yeah, definitely. I think we always need to be really mindful that there has been a shift in society. Society is different. There are people get anxious about things that they didn't get anxious about before, and we need to kind of recognize that. We do see behaviours now that we might not have seen, 5 or 6 years ago. So we have to be really flexible and adaptive in our practice. And what it isn't about is about lowering the standard or lowering the expectation. We still have high expectations for all of our young people, but we might need to go different ways about doing it. So one thing that I'm really passionate about is not excluding and suspending students unless it is absolutely necessary. So although yes, behaviour has become more challenging, we haven't had any permanent exclusions at this school for 4 years. And our suspension rates are well below the national average. And that is, down to number one, the fantastic pastoral team that I have within school. It's down to the teachers that are really flexible and adaptive in their approach, but also the wealth of, external agencies that I work with. So the sort of the ethos that we have is we are a Catholic school. For us to exclude students, suspend students, that's like a rejection. We want them to be part of our community. Let's see what help we can get them. And so the money that has previously been spent on alternative provision, for example, I'm spending now on getting people to come in. So we have different organisations that will come in and work with students for 1-2 days a week. And they kind of had a hybrid approach where they'll attend some lessons for a couple of days a week. They'll have the intervention with different organisations. And what we're finding is that's really helping us to make sure we still have high standards of behaviour. We still keep our suspension rates low. We still, there might be the odd one-off event one day where I'd have to permanently exclude, but that isn't in our head. And so we can keep all the students with us right through to the end of year 11 at the very least. A way to look at that as well is when I came, in year 11, we had 15 students that were out on alternative provision in year 11. That has a massive impact in loads of areas, not only the financial impact, but also, in terms of our outcomes data, because those students aren't necessarily going to be able to achieve, their full potential, but also in terms of our attendance data as well. So I took the decision to offer that, and now we have no students in year 11 that are on alternative provision, which is something that, I feel really, really proud about. But also it's about that collaborative approach with other schools as well. So, we are part of a multi-academy, but we also have really strong relationships with other schools in our locality. And that's been a big shift in the culture of this school, because it used to be, we joke sometimes where we've got the anecdote of our school is on top of a hill and it was the castle on the hill that nobody could get into. Whereas now we've been really outward facing and working with other schools and offering off-site direction, directed alternative provision at other schools, sending our students there for a circuit breaker or a period of time, and also welcoming their students into school, which has really helped give that reset.
So if I'm a head teacher listening and thinking my school is chaos, what's step one tomorrow at 8:30 should I do?
I think, as I said earlier, it's going back to basics. And it is making it really clear what you want to achieve and just focusing on one thing. That's what I did when I came to this school, where, I had students, our internal exclusion centre was full, suspensions were really, really high, and students were not in lessons. I said, right, the key thing is I want to get everybody into lessons. So I worked on that and worked with the staff about, right, what strategies am I going to give you to keep those kids in lessons? You need to look at making sure you're adapting your teaching so that everybody's engaged, and going back to that real fundamental of teaching and learning and relationships. It isn't a sign of weakness. And I think some staff think this, especially some staff that maybe have been teaching it a long, long time, to have a relationship with a student and to have a laugh and a joke with them, and it's called the law of propinquity. You give a little bit of yourself and they get a lot, they give you a lot as well. That isn't a sign of weakness. So when I talk to students, I talk about, what they've done on the weekend, what I've done on the weekend, what they're interested in. In the past, I remember when I was at school, teachers very rarely did that. it was very much you come into school, you do your work, but the world is different now. And so they have to see you as a human being. And if they buy into you as a human being, then, they think, oh, actually, you're a nice person. I'm going to, work with you. I'm going to, I'm not going to be against you. And I think that's really, really important.
Yeah, I think what you've said is good advice. In your experience, what common pitfalls what are the common pitfalls that schools fall into when they're trying to improve their behaviour and culture? What do you see?
I think trying to do too much at once and spreading yourself too thinly, I think it is really, really important. Also, where, with the work, when as a behaviour hub school going into other schools, we've come a long way in education that we now know that safeguarding is everybody's responsibility and it is the highest priority, and everybody will challenge people if they've not got a lanyard on or there's something they've not seen before, and everybody's really got that as a high priority. The big thing to do is to shift that to behaviour and make everybody see that behaviour is everybody's responsibility. In a secondary school, it isn't the head of year for that year group that has got the sole responsibility for the behaviour. It isn't the senior leader that is responsible for behaviour, that has sole responsibility. It's everybody, and everybody has their part to play. Again, little things that I think are really important that will help shift the culture and shift that behaviour. So litter. So when I walk about school, I will be forever picking litter up. And staff will look at me, and I said to staff, if I pick the litter up as the head teacher, then I can expect you to pick the litter up and I can expect the students to pick the litter up. Nobody here is any different or any more special than anybody else. So as the head teacher of this school, if I can pick litter up, I can expect everybody else to pick litter up. And so it is really about that kind of being at service to everybody, and we're all equal, and we've all got our part to play. And I think that's really important. And where I've seen it not work so well is in those schools where it is right, you're the person in charge of behaviour, so everything behaviour related is going to come to you. What you're doing there is you're de-skilling the rest of the staff, because what will happen is the kids will behave for that person, but they're not going to behave for you because they know there's not going to be any consequence. There's not going to be, that level of I'm not going to try and push it. So I think that's really, really key, is making sure that everybody's got that responsibility.
Because it's collectively buying into the standards, isn't it? And how do you get people to buy into your vision or the standards that you're trying to do? How do you do that?
Again, it comes down to that communication. So I speak to staff every week. I meet with my senior leadership team, and we meet every day. So we meet every morning at 8 o'clock, and we have a senior leadership team meeting every day. Being really visible. So I walk the school and go into every lesson at least twice a day, once in the afternoon, once in the morning. I am on duty and I do roaming duty, so I just walk around the school for every break time and lunchtime. And yeah, there are some times when you're really, really busy and you're like, oh, you know what, I could do without that. But it's about making a commitment to that, because if they can see that I'm around about, then everybody ups their game, because it's like, oh, Mr. Payton's coming. So and I understand for some colleagues that might be really difficult, especially when we've got lots of issues like supply, or you've got heavy demands that are coming in, especially in the winter, where we've got lots of sickness and stuff like that. But it's about making that real effort, and still teaching. So I still teach, and I think that's really important. I still teach, because then I can not just talk the talk, I have to walk the walk. So where I'm talking to staff about making sure your lessons are planned or doing reports, parents' evening, I'm in it with them as well. And so I'm not sat in my ivory tower kind of disconnected from what's going on within the school.
With that, I wanted to bring the subjects now to working with your pupils and your parents.
Yeah.
So clearly, student voice is important in your approach.
Yeah.
How do you go about gathering authentic feedback from pupils and using it to influence the whole school culture?
Yeah, so loads of different mechanisms, some really formal and the more traditional, some really ad hoc. So, we do all of the usual things that people do. We have student surveys every term that we put out via QR code and get students to complete those. We have a mission team that has got representatives from different groups within school that meet weekly to talk about issues. But it's also about having those conversations when you are about and about on duty, and having a check-in with the students and saying, right, how are things going? One big thing that we did last week that came from the students is we had a cultures day on Friday, and this was something that came from our sixth formers, where we're even though we're a Catholic school, we're only 42% Catholic, and we've got a very diverse population. And our sixth formers said, we want to celebrate that, sir. So could we have a cultures day? And from colleagues that know me within my school, I very rarely say no to anything. So I said, absolutely, let's do it. And it was an absolutely fantastic day. And we had a band group, drumming group come in. Students wore their traditional dress from their culture. We had different foods available at break time and lunchtime for students to try. And we'd really listened to that student feedback. And then what we got out of the day, the atmosphere in school was amazing. And then as they were leaving school, all of the positive comments from the students were, we really enjoyed this. Can we do it again? And it came from them. It wasn't from us. So listening to them and, acting on it. I can't do everything they want me to do. So, the kids are really keen that we have a swimming pool. And I'm like, yeah, I can't afford that. That's never going to happen. But, it's about being honest with them and saying, right, think about the things that we can make a positive difference and a positive change with. And that's where then, again, that trust develops. They can see that what they're saying has a positive action. And that's really, really important. They feel their voice is heard.
How did you bringing that to the parents then? You mentioned about trust earlier. How did you rebuild the parents' trust?
So if it's open in the public domain, if you go and search our Ofsted parent view, at the time of our Ofsted inspection, only 42% of our parents would recommend our school. So it was, that was in a pretty dire state. And there were lots of things I did where I had to front things out. So the first thing I did was I did coffee mornings and coffee evenings where I just opened the doors and welcomed parents into school. And, some of those meetings were really difficult to sit through because I got the parent hairdryer treatment where they just wanted to get everything off their chest about all of the things that they weren't happy about for the past 3 years. Even though I wasn't here and it was anything to do with me, I just said, I'm really sorry that that's happened to you. And now it's about listening to what's gone wrong and making sure it doesn't happen again. Have a big belief with the students and with the staff is that we can all make mistakes, but what we make sure we do is we never make the same mistake again. And, nobody's ever going to go, mad or be cross at somebody for making a mistake. It's when it happens repeatedly is when people get disappointed and upset. So those parents' evenings, increasing the social media and controlling that. So I control all of our school social media accounts because that is the window into our school. So I make sure everything is checked, everything is going out is of high quality, making sure that everything is shared appropriately, and also developing that relationship, via the social media, because that is how parents are going to get in contact. There are some parents that won't come to parents' evening, they won't respond to emails, they won't respond to phone calls, but we've got to find a way of getting in and reaching those really hard to reach families. And then, and way that we've seen that is we did our parent voice survey. I do it every term and send it out, base it on exactly the same questions that they're asked in the Ofsted parent view. And in the autumn term, in sort of just over 18 months, we've gone to 87% of our parents would recommend our school. So, we've still got a way to go. It's not perfect. And, I want it to be 100%. And I know that, we're not always going to see eye to eye with some things. We're going to disagree. But ultimately, even if we disagree, you'd still be able to recommend our school because you can understand the reasons why we're doing something. So I think just having that really open, transparent communication is really, really important. So this week, for example, we had from Bridget Phillipson the information about mobile phones come out early, late Sunday night, early Monday morning. We made sure that as a senior leadership team, on Monday morning, we came in and we looked at our policy with regards to mobile phones, looked at what the DfE was saying, and made sure we communicated that with parents straight away. We've always had a no mobile phones policy, but we just tweaked it to be in line with the DfE guidance, and we've given a lead-in time. So we've said, right, we sent the letter out on Monday. We've done assemblies with the students this week, so they're really aware, saying that from Monday, these are our new expectations with regards to mobile phones. If we do that and everybody's been, everybody's had the opportunity to know what's going on, to feedback any concerns, then when we roll it out, we'll very rarely get any issues crop up with it. So I think that's really important, especially when dealing with parents.
Yeah, it's that over communication again, isn't it? I
think definitely.
So I think with culture, everyone's trying to aim to get a high performing school.
Yeah.
But I think that's a difficult balance, being inclusive.
Yeah.
How do you ensure pupils we send are feel that they are supported? How do the parents feel that they're supported whilst maintaining the high expectations? Yeah.
So we know that with some of our students with additional needs, in particular with some of their families, there can be a high level of anxiety around, the support and the provision that's in school. So again, when it comes down to those that communication, we keep channels of communication really, really open. So what we have every Thursday evening is we have what we call a send clinic with our Senko, and parents can book a virtual meeting with our Senko to discuss any concerns they have. It might be something really small, it might be something larger, but the Senko, they know there's a time slot in the week where it's a virtual meeting. They don't have to come to school, which we know sometimes can be a barrier for some parents. They book it online on their phone, just like having, a FaceTime call or a WhatsApp video call, to make sure we know about the concerns, and then we can follow it up. We also do half-termly SEND review days where we have a whole day with our Senko, where she's available again. That's where parents can come in if we've got particular paperwork we need to, get sorted for additional support from other agencies.
Do you signpost them to like local communities? Because I think sometimes when parents, when they've got children with SEND, just that their own support network can be quite a hard thing.
So we're really lucky, within our localities, that there are quite a few kind of in particular autistic spectrum disorder kind of support groups for families. There are youth clubs for students that have got autism. That's been really beneficial, where they can speak to parents that have the same lived experience as them. But I think the key thing as well is, I think, just being open to support. We're very much we're very open and say we haven't got the answers for everything, but what we will do is we will go and work with other colleagues in other schools. We work really closely with a special school in our locality who does outreach work, and they've been fantastic, where we can just pick up the phone and say, oh, we've come across this, we've not experienced this before, can we have some training, can we have some support? And that's been really kind of beneficial and sort of transformational in the way that we kind of approach students with SEND and additional needs, because we know that nationally the number of special school places isn't sufficient, and we know that we're going to have students within mainstream that historically will have been at specialist provision, and we need to do our very best by those students to make sure that we're meeting their needs.
I think there's clearly a rise in children that requires sort of that additional support.
And it's about being flexible in terms of those reasonable adjustments that you need to make. We have high standards, and we have quite a strict uniform policy. We have strict policies for a lot of things to make sure that the school is good or well ordered and it is successful. But we need to understand that for some students, certain parts of our policies and procedures might be quite challenging. So we need to make sure we look to make a reasonable adjustment about it, where I think, for example, students that might have sensory issues, we've got a blazer as part of our uniform. They find the blazer quite difficult. So we have to think, right, well, what reasonable adjustment can we make so you feel confident, you feel comfortable when you're in school. It's not going to negatively impact on your attendance. It's not going to negatively impact on your levels of concentration and your attainment because you're so overwhelmed by what's going on sensory, that we need to, be able to adjust to those needs.
I wanted to move on to staff wellbeing and
Yeah,
development. I think when you're a new leader in any environment, whether at a school or a business,
yeah,
change management is a massive thing, which ultimately turns into staff turnover.
yeah,
So I wanted to see how did you manage that, and get people to support your vision,
yeah,
and also, did you expect people to leave, or how was that for you, and
yeah.
were you content with that if it meant supporting your vision?
Yeah, totally. So again, I think the golden thread that we've spoken about is down to that communication, and it's that really open and honest conversation and communication that is needed. So when I came, I set out my stall with all of the staff and said, "This is what I want the school to be. These are the areas that I think, are going well. This is what I'm not happy with. This is where it's not good enough." And in that first period, I did have 15 staff say, I'm not up for it. I'm not aligned with your vision. And do you know what? I respect those staff for saying that. That's absolutely
Absolutely,
fine.
yeah.
I'm not gonna, try and keep people here that don't want to be here. You need to be on board. You need to understand that we're going to go through a period of change. Things are going to be different, especially for some staff, that had worked here kind of 20 years, 25 years. It is a big change for them, and I totally appreciate it. And some of those colleagues that maybe were coming towards the end of their career after having a long career in teaching, thinking, I don't want to change now. And that's absolutely fine. And I respect you for that. And I'll support you in whatever else you want to go on and do, once you've left us. But ultimately, this is what's going to happen. This is my vision for the school, and these are my non-negotiables. So I think, that level of communication and also explaining the rationale behind it. Why are we doing these things? What is the intended outcome of these things? What is the intended outcome if you put this policy or procedure in place? I think is really, really key. Just like we do when we teach the students, we need to teach them, the why. We're not just the what are we going to do and how are we going to do it. We need to teach them the why are we doing it. I think that's really, really important. So yeah, and then when we had those people leaving, we've got new people joining our organisation. It's about having that really robust induction program, so they
Yeah,
know from the outset this is what the expectation is, and that starts on interview. That starts when you shortlist
absolutely,
it
yeah.
and you bring them in for interview. And I meet every candidate that comes for interview here. I don't necessarily do the full interview process because that would be quite time consuming for me. But I trust my senior leaders to know they're in line with the vision, and when we know, and we know what we're all working towards. So that induction starts on that. And for some people, they might think, oh, actually, this isn't something that I want to be part of. And again, that's absolutely fine. It's not for everybody. I always say with schools, it's like, what supermarket you choose to shop at. If some people choose to shop at Sainsbury's, some people choose to shop at Aldi. It's the same with schools. Every school has got its unique character. We're not all the same. And for some people, they will buy into the ethos, and then for other people, they think, no, I don't. That's not me. That's not who I am, and that's absolutely fine as well. There's no shame in that. There's no harm in that. You've got to do what's right for you. So having that really robust induction program is really, really important. So from day one, they know exactly where they stand and they know exactly what the expectation is when they're at work.
Yeah, I think that's something that we've done in this business, in Flourish, and I think sometimes it's almost from when you first speaking to a potential candidate, that you sort of setting out your stall and saying, this is where we are at. This is, some people like that, some people don't. We're
Yeah,
happy if that's not your vision, like you say, but
yeah,
if you are, come on board and you'll get X, Y, and Z to support you in in achieving the sort of goals that you put for yourself.
Absolutely.
Did you when you were having those kind of conversations, obviously there's a lot about sort of staff wellbeing in schools, and what sort of systems or structures have you implemented that would support new recruits or existing?
I think I sound like a broken record, I think, but it is down to that communication. So what I do from the outset is, for example, I start the school calendar for the next academic year around April time, to make sure that from the outset everybody knows exactly when the parents' evenings are, what the expectation is, so nothing is sprung upon anybody. I make sure that for teaching staff, the directed time 1265 is really clearly calculated, and they know exactly where everything goes, and very open about, come and speak to me if you've got any questions about it. It's not, a closed door, it's not a closed book. I'm more than happy, to take any questions or comments about it. And I think that stands people in good stead, because we've all got lives outside of school, and we need to be able to organise our lives. And I know when I was a teacher, as just like a classroom teacher, a main scale teacher, there was nothing worse than you planning something out and then it being sprung on you. Oh, we got parents' evening next Thursday, and you'd be like, oh well, I've arranged to do this, and then that resentment creeps in. I've got a life, I've got a family, so I want my time to be organised. I consider myself an organised person. Not everybody is like that, but I need to try and help people to become organised so they can have that work-life balance. That's really important. I think again, we only do things if we really have to do it. We don't just do things for the sake of doing it. So, for example, we have meetings after school. If there is a point in the year where we're like, right, well, what do we need to, there's an SLT slot or a middle leader slot, and we've got to think of something. If there's nothing automatically comes to mind, we're not just going to have the meeting for meeting's sake, because you've got that resentment, and then it just builds that positive culture. I'm, as I said, a very visible head teacher, out and about all the time, but also I have an open door policy. I don't have a PA that people have to go through to try and get to me. I manage all my own emails. I manage my own diary. And my office door is open 95% of the time. So yeah, Monday morning, sometimes I have a queue of people that want to come and speak to me, but I'd rather that than things go on in the background that I don't know about. And again, that resentment kicks in and negativity towards school. And also being able to have like a challenging conversation, I think, is really, really important. People know that I don't shy away from that kind of, I wouldn't use the word confrontation, but where I have to have a conversation with somebody about something that's going to be uncomfortable. It's all about that saying of like, swallow the frog, isn't it? First thing in the morning, and do the thing that you don't want to do. So, if I've got to have a challenging conversation with somebody, I'll get it out of the way and get it done. And everything is coming from a kind place. Everything is coming from a place where I want the school and I want the students to succeed. So yeah, there might be times where we have to have, an uncomfortable conversation, but the reason behind it is a positive reason. So having that kind of attitude, I think, it is really important, and making sure that the staff feel valued, they feel listened to, they feel loved, and then ultimately that they want to stay. And I have to say, in the past 2 years now, our staff turnover is much less significant than it was when I first arrived, because people are being played to their strengths, and people, like I said, are feeling valued and feeling looked after.
I mean, that's really good. I just wanted to say, how do you measure success as of the culture that you've built in the school? Because it's not something you can put a finger on, is it? But how do you think you measure that?
I think there's loads of like metrics that we can use. So obviously we've got the ones that we all know about in terms of our outcomes. If you've got positive outcomes, then you can say you've got a positive culture within your school. If you've got low suspension rates, high attendance, which we've got, but also looking at the other things like staff absence is really, really low. Staff will come into work even if they've got a little bit of a headache because they want to do the best for the kids. Whereas I've worked in other schools and worked with other schools where, they have a sniffle and it's, oh, I'm not going to go in today because they don't feel valued. I think the low turnover of staff, but also listening to, the feedback. So, as I said, we already do termly parent surveys. And, from when I started it being very, very negative, yes, we still have some parents that will say negative things, but the negative things are quite easy to solve. And they're kind of procedural issues. They're not systemic kind of culture issues within the school. I survey staff every term as well. And, and that's an anonymous survey where, like, how do you think things are going? We have line management meetings, which are now timetabled, which never happened before, with senior leaders, middle leaders. We have fortnightly department time as well. So there's all of those kind of mechanisms where staff can talk about things, and we can use that as our metrics to see how we can measure the impact of how our culture shift is taking hold.
And those are all really positive. I think that having those mechanisms and that support usually sort of translates into good culture. I've certainly seen that with my own business. I wanted to come into the final segment now. Just a couple of questions left.
Yeah.
So now we've been chatting for a long time, but for me, is it about what advice can we share can you share with other schools? So for school leaders who may be at the beginning of their journey to reshape school culture, what advice would you offer them?
Don't be too hard on yourself. Don't think that you've got to solve it all overnight, because school improvement is a journey and it takes time. And never ever be afraid to ask for support and help. I know sometimes when you get the position, and when I was first a head teacher, you're given this job and it's like you're given the keys to the castle and you're supposed to know all the answers. You don't know all the answers, and there are still things that happen now where I've never dealt with that before. So don't be afraid to reach out. And I know that, from all of the head teachers and senior leaders that I've worked with within my school, within my trust, within the locality, everybody has got a kind heart and everybody wants to help and everybody's there to support people. So don't be afraid
to be vulnerable.
Yeah, it's not, asking for help is not a negative. Admitting you don't know how to deal with a situation is not a negative. It just means you've not encountered that yet and you need to get the experience to do it. So that's really important.
For my own personal, I think it's like when the government brings out a new piece of legislation and you're like, what's that grey area mean?
Yeah.
But there is a support network out there where you can kind of model your way through it together. Can't you? And I think, that's amazing.
And take full advantage of those support networks. That's really important.
Final question. If a school could take just one actionable step tomorrow to start building a stronger, more positive culture, what would you recommend they did first?
I think it's really key to have a real clear vision and make sure that is communicated to everybody so everybody knows and goes on the journey with you. If you've not got that real clear vision, that's where people aren't going to know what's expected of them. So I think,
how do you create that vision?
I think it sits within you, doesn't it, as your moral purpose. I think sometimes is what your expectation is what kind of school you want to run, what kind of head teacher do you want to be. So you do have to do some self-reflection on that and think about, okay, well, what am I going to ask? What am I asking of people? And it's taking the time to step back in the noise of the day-to-day where you're doing all the normal operational things to think, okay, what is it that's really, really important to me? For me, what's really important is that we give the students really positive experiences, because through the rest of their life, no matter what they do, when they apply for jobs, when they fill forms in, they've got to write down St. Augustine's Catholic High School. And when they write it down, I want them to be kind of smiling to themselves as they write it down, remembering all the positive things. I don't want them to be writing it down with resentment, thinking that school failed me or I didn't have a positive experience. That's what kind of motivates me and drives me, is making sure that the students are happy and they enjoy their time that they have with us, because it's going to stay with them forever.
Yeah, you're shaping the future, and I certainly still remember my school times fondly.
Definitely.
Just last thing, obviously, thank you very much, Luke. You've been amazing. If people wanted to reach out to you, how would they do that?
Yeah,
Would you be happy to let them bend your ear, or?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, more than happy anytime. So I'm on LinkedIn. You can also contact me through the school, Facebook, school website. My contact details are on there. And any help or support, or just to be somebody to listen to somebody, we're that's what we're here for. We're all in it together, aren't we? So
Amazing. Thank you very much, Luke. I
no
really
worries.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care.
Take care. Cheers.